Welcome aboard, shipmates. This is Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories, a training program created for the United States Naval Sea Cadet Corps by our friends and supporters at the Navy Talent Acquisition Group in Philadelphia. I'm your host, Warrant Officer David Sheets of the Naval Sea Cadet Corps. I am joined by our all-Navy support crew of MC1 Quinlan, who's our PAO, and STG1 Lewison, who's our Technical Support Director. Today's topic is the extremely important field of Navy shipboard damage control, which is actually very timely considering what's happening right now in San Diego. Our presenter is Petty Officer First Class Joshua Brown of the Naval Recruiting District in New England. Thank you for coming to join us today. Cadets, this is an interactive presentation. So when you have questions, and I hope that you do, just like every episode, put your questions in the comment section and we'll get those answered. Also, as you know, there is an online quiz after this presentation. The link will be available once the live broadcast is over. So get that done, get your 2 hours of virtual drill credit, and get the satisfaction of reliving this episode in a quiz. So without any further delay, Petty Officer Brown, this ship is all yours.
Thank you very much, sir, for having us. This is my first time with the Sea Cadets. As he said, my name is Petty Officer Joshua Brown. I'm a damage controlman in the United States Navy. I've been in for 7 amazing years. Before this, I was stationed on board the New York, and firefighting is in my blood. So we'll get started here. I'm going to share a screen, and we're going to go into a little bit of let me pull this up.
That's okay if the screen, is this, because cadets, I really hope you appreciate his background image. So this whole episode, I have a flag, he has a flag, incredibly patriotic people going on here.
And for some reason, this is the problem we were talking about.
Is screen sharing not happening, sadly?
It is not happening. All right,
so Petty Officer Lewison, have any direction you can provide?
Yeah, that's what, can you see me now? There we go.
Excellent.
All right, so like I said, my name is...
This is the way it works, so no big deal.
Here we go. So like I said before, my name is Damage Controlman DC1 Joshua Brown. I've been in the Navy for 7 amazing years. We'll slide to the first slide. So this is about me. I'm from a little town in South Carolina, population probably about 50,000 people, very, very small for South Carolina area. I grew up near all military bases except for Navy. It was the only branch I actually didn't grow up near. I had Marine Corps bases, Army bases, and Air Force bases near me.
So then how did the Navy become a positive influence to you?
So my great-great-grandfather was in the Navy. And everybody in my family has served, from my father to my brother to all my uncles. My sister's actually going into the nursing program as an officer.
Oh, great.
So the military is driven in our blood. And my great-grandfather was the only one who was Navy. And it was something he said that stuck with me from a very young age. I said, why the Navy and not the Marine Corps? Why the Navy and not this? He said, well, I know 2 things. He said, I know that I'm going to be stationed near a beach, and I know that I'm going to be stationed near a beach. So I said, all right, so you like beaches. That's what I'm talking about. So my grandfather kind of sold me on the Navy at a young age.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah. Been in the Navy for 7 amazing years. My first 5 years, I was stationed on board the USS New York. It was probably one of the most iconic ships to ever be on. It's got the World Trade Center blood coursing through the veins of that ship. And to be a firefighter on a ship that is named after the 9/11 is just, it's probably one of the biggest honors you could ever ask for. 343 firefighters died that day, and that ship was made in the remembrance of all the people from New York City, the shore patrol, those 343 firefighters who never made it home. So just to be walking on that ship, that memorial that they used 7.5 tons of World Trade Center steel to build is just an amazing feeling.
You know, when I've had the honor to be part of Fleet Week New York, and when the USS New York comes up the Hudson River, everyone stops and looks at her. Right? It's a big deal. It means a lot to the New York metro area because it is a floating memorial to the people that are lost. Right? But then it also shows how we recovered. Right? And you were part of that crew, so that's pretty impressive.
Absolutely. It was I actually went to Fleet Week New York. I got to do Fleet Week New York 3 times before I left the USS New York. So I had the luxury of being there all 3 times that I had. It was amazing time. The people of New York really show you a lot of hospitality, and coming all the way up the coast from Florida where we were originally stationed, every place we went to showed us a lot of love.
Right. So what were the types of activities you were involved with when you were in Manhattan for Fleet Week?
So we had actually the Damage Control Olympics that we took place in. There was other sailors. The Coast Guard was actually there. In the Damage Control Olympics, what they do is different Olympic games that consist of, you got to patch up a pipe that has a rupture in it, and you're timed on how fast you do it, and you're timed on how good the patch actually is. The firefighting games are unbelievable. We actually do firefighting tug of war. They put a bottle in the middle of you, 2 of you, and you guys blast each other with hoses. It's an amazing time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So. We do have one question from the cadets before we move on, and this has to do with your great grandfather.
Okay.
So, what time period did he serve?
He was in the 40s. So he doesn't really talk. He didn't really talk about it a whole lot before he passed.
Okay.
It was kind of one of those things that he just kind of pushed us all Navy. And I think because he pushed so hard Navy, everybody went other military branches,
Okay.
except for me. I was the rebellious one from my family. So.
Okay, fair enough. Excellent. Great. Thank you.
So we'll go on to the next thing. Why I joined the Navy. I joined the Navy predominantly the same reason why most of you guys are sitting in front of the screen right now. I joined for mentorship. Mentorship is very, very, very hard to find in the civilian world. It's easy to find leadership, but mentorship is how are you doing? Kind of those kneecap to kneecap conversations versus, hey, let's put some creases in those core frames and let's go out and do some work. Those are leaders. Mentors are every day. Hey, how's your family doing? How are you doing? Is there anything I can help you with? What can make this process easier? Very similar to before we even stepped on here to actually shoot this video, there was 4 people online. Sir, you were helping me. Hey, do you have any questions? What can we do to make this easier? Quinlan, the same thing. Hey, do we do this? Do we do that? So it's good to have somebody there that's mentoring you through the process versus just, hey, good luck.
Excellent. That's actually a great point. And, that is all, if you want to roll that up into another word, shipmate, right? That actually means something. Yeah, it's meaningful. So cadets, definitely when you're working with your younger cadets, or if you're in a leadership position, leadership, it does involve exactly what Petty Officer Brown is talking about. So nice sentiment. Good quality there. Thank you.
Absolutely. The best thing about my job is being a D-Seaman. So before I joined the Navy, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what job I wanted. Pretty much I knew I was just joining the Navy and I was going to a beach. And they sat me down. They said, you're going to be a damage controlman. They kind of briefly explained the job. And when I got out to the fleet and I got a real experience of the job and the profession, there wasn't a piece of it I really didn't like. Um, Not my job per se. Um, it,
Nice.
it's just amazing. You're dealing with firefighting equipment. You're dealing with chemical biological equipment. It's tedious, but it's amazing. The best thing about my job is being a damage controlman. I wouldn't want any other profession.
So where is A school for DC?
It's right there in Chicago. That was the other best part. I graduated boot camp and I went right across the street.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I didn't have to get on a plane and fly to either Texas or Virginia or Pensacola. I went straight to on a bus and got across the street.
All right, right there at Great Lakes. So was because everyone does firefighting, right, in recruit training.
Absolutely.
Okay. But I would assume that DC A school is, significantly more intense than that.
Absolutely. Day one, we call it the holy day. Um, they call it the holy day because they get the demons out in the morning and they baptize you in the afternoon. And what I mean by that is you go into a gas chamber, day one A school, and it's absolutely horrible. I mean, it's just you're choking pretty bad. Your eyes are watering. You're blowing up all kinds of stuff. Um, it's pretty intense. And the portion that they have at boot camp is like a half a pill for 30 people. They put it on a burner, and it
Hmm.
gets in your eyes, and it makes you. It's basically tear gas. Um, at A school, there's 4 of you in a room, and they use 2 pills, so it's smoked out. And then the holy day, the rest of it is you come back in the afternoon, and they pull that ice cold water out of the Chicago lake, and they spray you in a decontamination station. And it is cold. It takes your breath away, and you got to stay in there and sing a song.
Okay. All right. So everything has a purpose, right? It may not feel like it at the time. So what's the purpose of all that other than they can get away with it?
So it gives you confidence in your equipment. Uh, and it really honestly does build confidence in your equipment because that gas mask, when you put it on, it's like taking the first breath as a newborn baby. You're just so happy that your equipment actually works. And it builds confidence when you're out at sea. If anything were to happen, I know this equipment works. And I will tell you that trial by error, that's one of those things. Hey, if I didn't know if it worked or not, I would be a little nervous putting on that mask for the first time. But because of A school and the training I got there, um, it's something I think is just absolutely amazing. And I trust my equipment 100%.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Absolutely. So moving on to the next point, my top Navy memory it was national tasking. We nationally tasked for the president at the time, and it was called Mission Odyssey Pilot. Uh, at the time, the embassies had been blown up a couple years previous, and a Navy SEAL team came on board our ship, and basically said, "Hey, we own the ship right now. You guys are deploying in the next 24 hours. We don't know where you're going or what the mission is exactly, but we'll be back probably in the next 30 days, 40 days." So we got on the ship, we went across the ocean, and we got this terrorist named Abu Khatal. He was actually in charge of the embassy bombings, and we brought him back to Washington for trial.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was my first real experience, I would say, of the Navy. I'd
Mhm.
only been in for a year and a half. My wife, who's actually in the picture, was the ombudsman. That was when I got back from national tasking right there. So
Okay.
as you can see, that ribbon rack's very very low. So I was a young sailor.
But now you're just so salty, right, that you can barely
Yeah, the
stay
whole 7
straight.
years.
No, no, that's awesome. So back to that national tasking and cadets. That's definitely a term that you'll hear. It's kind of nondescript, and that's on purpose. Did you know this is what you were going to do, or only certain people were briefed and everybody had their job and it was need to know?
So how I originally found out was I came home and my wife, because my wife was the ombudsman, she was a part of the triad. Um, she told me, "Hey, I packed your stuff. Here you go." And that was all she knew. And then when I got to the ship, I found out we were doing national tasking. We did not know what the mission was called. We did not know really anything about it until it was over. Um,
Okay.
Now, working as a damage controlman, I know that we worked damage controlman and hull maintenance technicians. We had to build a little mini jail cell for this guy in the middle of our well deck um, for him
Nice.
to stay in because they weren't going to put him in a room.
Okay.
But we found out really the more or less the whole mission when we got back, and there was still stuff that we weren't entitled to at all.
Huh. Interesting. So the SEALs are like, well, we're just going to go get this guy, like it was a matter of fact, and it's like, okay, here he is. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they didn't tell us how they knew he was there, or we didn't even know what time they were going to strike or what they were going to do. All we knew is um, the boats went out the back of the ship. They disappeared for like 2 days. We were doing loops in the water, and then all of a sudden we had what was called emergency ballast control. We dropped the back of the ship down into the water, and they drive into the back of the ship at a high speed, and they usually have whatever they were looking for.
Okay. Excellent. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. So my previous assignments, like I said before, the USS New York LPD 21 World Trade Center ship. Um, lot of family on board that ship still. A lot of family has gone from that ship to other ships. I actually have a young sailor who worked with me on the New York, and he was currently on the Bonham Richard. So he was a young sailor at the time, and I think he's a second class now.
Okay.
And I'm currently at NRD New England. So Navy Recruiting District New England, a lot of great leaders out here, a lot of great mentors. So I've been blessed as far as my Navy career assignments.
So, and I'm glad you brought that up because cadets, we're having people of the quality of Petty Officer Brown part of this series of presentations, and they're coming from all over the country in order to do this. So we're very, very grateful, and this is a national program now. So thank you again, and to all your shipmates at NRD New England to allow you or to suggest that you come and visit us today, because this is great. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you guys chalking up some time and let me speak on this program. I'll go move to the next slide here. All right, damage controlman history. As you can see, that was one of the places where we did firefighting training. They light a room on fire, and you guys get to put it out. It gets pretty hot in that room. But the history real quick, the U.S. Navy has a long history of training its sailors in damage control and designing its ship for stability. Damage control is a Navy rating established in 1948 that specializes in damage control, flooding, firefighting, and other emergency procedures to keep the ship afloat when catastrophe looms. That pretty much sums up damage control, every scenario that you would go through. A lot of people say, well, damage control, that's either flooding or firefighting. Damage control can be anything from a chemical, biological, radiation. Any of that is more or less considered damage control. Flooding is pretty self-explanatory. Water's coming into the ship. We want it outside the ship.
Right.
Firefighting, that's why the picture's there. And then emergency procedures. A lot of times we fix bulkheads that are protruding or pushing inwards or whatever we need to do to make the ship more buoyant.
So I have another question from one of our cadets, and this is actually a very nice one, having to do with future plans for this person. And he says that he's looking into damage control, right, as a potential thing. So our cadets are in high school, right? Some are a little bit younger than that. Is there anything that this person should maybe focus on or try or be part of in order to, make it a little bit more, I don't know, easier is not the right term, but to be more prepared going into this vocation.
Absolutely. So I had a damage control chief, DCC, who used to always tell me the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And what he meant by that was starting small and setting goals in specific programs. So already the fact that they're in the Sea Cadet program, they're going to be light years ahead of anybody at boot camp. Just with the military structure and how they talk, how they walk, how they carry themselves, the lessons they've learned in the Sea Cadet program. So I would say probably the best and foremost thing, especially for damage control, is while you're in that Sea Cadet program, set 5 goals. And of those 5 goals, circle 2 of them. Those 2 are the 2 goals that you need to concentrate predominantly on while you're in the Sea Cadet program. Whether it be, hey, I want to be a mentor to this person, I want to be physically fit, whatever your goals are for the Sea Cadet program. And then look at whatever your next step is to move out of the Sea Cadet program. Okay, I'm looking at enlisting, I'm looking at doing this, whatever your next step is per se in your career progression, moving out of Sea Cadets. I would say to go to the fire departments, especially if they're looking at damage control, they have a lot of volunteer time that they give to individuals at any point. They love giving training.
And that's true too. I mean, in our area, there's a lot of volunteer fire departments, right? So at the unit, have them show off equipment and do things like that. But, even cadets, possibly, be a volunteer firefighter yourself and find out it's a thing you want, right? And then just do it.
Absolutely. Everybody in the Navy is a firefighter anyways. You're going to get trained in firefighting and first aid. So you're going to have 3 different jobs while you're in the military. You're going to be a firefighter, you're going to be first aid responder, and you're also going to have whatever your second profession is. Me, I was just lucky. I'm a firefighter and a first aid responder. And then third, I guess you'd call me, I'm a shipmate.
Excellent. So luckily, ships are not always catching on fire and there's not always an emergency and things like that. So what does a damage controlman do the rest of the time?
We concentrate mostly on training. There's a 6P method we run by. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance. So we got to be training all the time for a worst case scenario. If you train for a, hey, everything's going to turn out great, that's when it happens to be the worst. So we train for absolute worst case scenarios constantly. We're training our other shipmates. We're training the people above us, behind us. We got to make sure that ship stays afloat at all cost.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you.
All right, I'll move on here to the next slide. If there's anybody have any more questions, or
no, I'm feeding to you as we go along.
All right, there we go.
And cadets, again, if you do have questions, and I hope you do, put them in the chat window, and we'll get them read off.
All right, here we go.
I never imagined myself being a firefighter in the Navy.
When I started out, I was a civilian firefighter before I came in here, but I was from a real small town in Iowa. So, we didn't have a whole lot of excitement going on. I went in to see the Navy recruiter, asked what was the closest thing to being a firefighter, and he said damage controlman, so I said, sign me up. You want to make sure that the equipment that you're going to take on scene works properly and is ready to go in the event that you need to go handle a casualty in any way, shape, or form, fire, flooding, toxic gas. You got to be physically and mentally tough. Those bells, they don't wait for anybody. They go off at all sorts of times. You may get done working a 12, 14, hour day. You go to lay in your rack, and 15 minutes later, somebody rings the bell, and there's no one else. It's you, and that's your home on fire. So you got to be ready to mentally and physically to stand up, put on all that gear, and go fight it for however long it needs to be.
fires is pretty much a wood paper. The Bravo fire, which is any flammable liquid or oils or hazmat that may have spilled and caught on fire or paint. Charlie fires are electrical fires. Delta fires will be the jet flight deck. I've never experienced that. Hopefully, never have to. But we would just work with the crash, and at the last resort, we would have to actually jettison the jet off the side of the ship. But hopefully, it wouldn't come to that.
During one of our workup underways to get ready for deployment, we did have a fire and just started up. We had to respond to that at about 10 o'clock at night. Fire out of control. We had a bunch of guys who had just shown up weeks before, brand new. And you tell them, you try to teach them all you can through word of mouth, you run drills, but until, you see some shooting out flames at you, you just don't know. You don't know the heat. You don't know who's going to panic, what steps are going to be taken, if they're going to be the right thing. And that right there proved to me that these guys are good to go.
It instills faith in your team, just knowing that these guys, like, they got your back 100%.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. And cadets, if you just notice how tight a lot of these spaces are, right? And it's dark. It's on fire. It's full of smoke, right? This is intense.
Absolutely. It's your first fire, the first time you ever have one. It's kind of a organized chaos for you, more chaos than organized.
Right.
But thank God you have your other shipmates next to you that are more the opposite of you. They're more organized and chaotic. But it's definitely a eye-opening experience.
Absolutely.
So what the damage controlmen do, and what I do in my rating, these are just a couple brief ones. Ship stability and buoyancy. The ship, obviously, it's on the water. It's moving left to right, right to left, forward to back, back to forward. It just kind of sloshes around the ocean. So what ship stability and buoyancy does is that we make sure the ship stays low in the ocean and it doesn't move left to right as much. Listing, we call it listing in the Navy. And then we make sure the trim is good, so we're actually smooth sailing through the water.
So how do you do that?
You have what's called a ballast tank. Ballasting is filling up water inside the ship. I know that sounds crazy, but you fill certain tanks and then you blow water out of certain tanks. So if somebody's kind of leaning to the left, I would put a bucket of water in their hand, in their right hand, and they'd lean back towards that side, so it straighten them back out.
Okay.
That's kind of what we do with water. We load it on one side or the other. The best way to look at listing is if you've seen two people on a teeter-totter, and one person's 200 pounds and the other person's 100 pounds. It's going to be tilting towards the 200 pound side. Now, if I take a 100-pound sandbag and add it to the 100-pound guy, it's going to flat even out, and they can balance.
Huh. Okay. Makes sense. Good visual.
And then we do the same thing for the trim. Firefighting. Firefighting's firefighting. Like they said, they probably said Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and that all seems very, very weird when you first hear it. But it lets everybody know, because you're jotting all this stuff down of what the actual fire is. Alpha fire is basically wood, clothing, something that can burn embers. A fuel fire is any liquid that can catch on fire. Any liquid at all that catches fire is a class Bravo. A class Charlie is electrical. So you got to have more than one person. You can't just have firefighters at all these fires. You need an electrician at a class Charlie fire. So we work together as a team, not just the damage controlman, but every shipmate on that ship has to do their job to make sure that we're fighting this fire safe. And then the last fire is a Delta. That would be basically anything that's burning metal. So a plane crashes on the flight deck, and it's burning, and we can't control it, we push it into the ocean and let it burn in the ocean.
And each one of these classes of fires takes different methods in order to extinguish them, right? So it's absolutely vital to know what that is.
So it takes different. It not only does it take different. It takes different extinguishing agents. It takes different approaches. It takes different personnel. Um, and no fire is the same. So I could have a class alpha fire, and it could just stay a class alpha fire. I could have a class alpha fire that blows into a class Charlie, class Bravo, and then you're fighting two fires at one time. So it's very meticulous to know your job and to know what firefighting agent, proper distancing, to maintain your team is safe.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Gas-free engineering. That's one of our daily checks. I mean, there's fuel and all kinds of liquids rolling through that ship. If they start leaking, it could be very, very hazardous to the team. There's freon on side of ship. Obviously, if an AC unit starts leaking, it's called physogen, and it can really hurt some people. So we actually do gas-free engineering. We walk around spaces to make sure they're safe, a proper oxygen level. Chemical biological warfare. There's a school that the damage controlmen go to in Missouri, and it's actually the next two topics right there: chemical, biological, and nuclear warfare. And what they do at the school is it's a 2-month-long course, and they teach you how to deal with chemical agents. A while back, they were shooting gas into Syria, and they were killing people. Actually, that's what we went to learn about, was how we protect the ship from gas, from radiation, how to keep the ship safe and the personnel safe at all times.
So just say, for like that example, for a chemical attack on a ship, in just very high level terms, what do you do?
So we have something called AFFF. If you've ever been inside your bathtub and you start your bathtub up and you put in, the suds to make it sud up, it starts sudding up. What we do is we spray the outside of the ship basically with this stuff called AFFF. It's aqueous film forming foam, and it covers the ship like a giant bubble bath. And those agents aren't able to stick. It's almost 92% effective if you can get it out in the first 10 minutes.
Okay, so that's after the chemical agents are on, that disperses them.
Absolutely, we have that, and then we have scrub brushes and all kinds of stuff we hit the ship with. And there's a certain method that you actually scrub. You don't scrub like up and down, up and down, up and down, because it'll spray that agent everywhere. So you actually pull it from the wall all the way down to the deck, and then you guys wash off the deck, the floor.
Okay. Got it. And is that same basic thing as what's happening for biological and nuclear, but maybe different agents?
Yeah, so biological and chemical, those are just agents. Those are liquids. Nuclear, the best thing you can do is distance and time. Basically, you want to be as low on the ship as possible. You want to be as far away from the blast as possible, and you want to have as much stuff between you and that blast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And there's parts of the ship that are deemed nuclear safe. Now, obviously, if a nuclear bomb goes off underneath the ship, it's not really much we can do about it.
True.
But typically, that's not going to happen. And we have a lot of anti-defense systems that prevent that.
Okay. Nice.
Emergency repairs. A lot of times, as a damage controlman, you'll be laying in your rack at night, and you'll hear the bells go off. And it's typically a busted pipe or a ruptured pipe, and you got to fix it immediately, especially if it's something that the ship needs right then. So that kind of goes with emergency repair and flooding. But emergency repair could be anything. A ladder well gives out, a frame gives out, something cracks, something breaks, tanks warp. You got to be able to go in and fix those immediately.
Okay.
Flooding's pretty self-explanatory. We don't want water inside the ship, especially when you have a lot of different electrical components everywhere. It could do some damage. So we try to minimize flooding as much as possible. And then the last billet there is probably the most important billet. Training your replacement. So many times we get caught up in, like, let's just train right now for this scenario. You need to train the person to your ability and the person above you's ability. So, because eventually we're going to leave the ship. It's kind of like being in Sea Cadet program. Eventually you guys are going to leave the Sea Cadet program. You need to be training those next people that are behind you to fill your slots and show them how to train the people behind them to fill their slots.
Yes, excellent point. Excellent point.
So training is probably the most important thing that you can do as a sailor, as a mentor, and for overall safety. You're laying next to the guy at night. He's your family at that point, or girl. You guys are a family.
Mm-hmm.
So train. You got to train like you would want to save your brother, your sister, your mom, or your dad.
So a question for you is, all right, so, with your experience and being on the USS New York, we're talking ship here, right? But, the damage control is also part of, say, like submarines, right? Is there a different subgroup? Do they not have, how does that work? Or are DC specifically ship based?
Yeah, so for a surface ship, we have a firefighting manual. It's called NSTM 555 Volume 1. That's surface ship firefighting. Volume 2 for the NSTM 555 Volume 2 is subsurface. So that would be all your subsurface ships. That's how they fight the fires. And their process is entirely different than ours. We have CO2 bottles we run around with. They have oxygen that drops out of the air, basically, that they use, kind of like being an airplane almost. But there's definitely different methods for ships and how you're going to fight those fires. Okay.
So, but do DCs serve also on submarines, or is it just surface ships?
It's just surface ships predominantly. I've never heard of a DCman being on a sub. It gives us a lot of bad habits for the surface ship.
Okay.
So usually your engineering department on a sub will do that portion of the firefighting.
Okay. All right. So, that makes sense. Just maybe due to the number of personnel on board, but the function has to be there. It was just
the
more.
The function is still the same, and they still have to learn it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
I'll move to the next slide here. These are just a couple pictures. Top left, that's called swim call. I'm the guy swimming up in the background.
Okay.
It's literally, we drop the back of the ship open and you jump out in the middle of the ocean, you and your friends, and you guys go for a swim.
Okay, so where did that happen?
That actually happened on the way to we were actually on the way to Italy at the time.
Okay.
And they let us do a swim call right off the coast of Italy.
Okay.
So it was pretty cool to be able to say, hey, I swam out in the ocean, with 800 other people.
And you're out in the ocean, right? So.
Oh, yeah, you can jump off the flight deck. It's like 62 feet, 52 feet into the water. But it's very close to the backside. So they have people in boats that are always going around you guys to make sure everybody's safe. So it's monitored very well.
Okay.
The bottom picture, those are all basically the guys that I deployed with my first deployment. And that's getting ready to go to a command holiday party. Command holiday parties are unbelievable. It's a time for you to get with your ship family and really enjoy what you guys have done as a ship that year. Awards are given out. I think my first ship, they gave out a car.
Really?
Yeah, they'll give out a car. They'll give out TVs. They give out absolutely just outrageous stuff. And about one in every other person wins something.
Okay.
They give out $20 gift cards to Applebee's or Outback or, different restaurants. It's awesome. It's a great time.
Well, that's very nice.
Upper right-hand corner, that's actually me in Rome. So I went to the Colosseums. I always thought it was cool watching, these different gladiator movies and stuff. So to actually be able to see something like that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, Rome is one of a kind, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shocked at how much of history they still have there. Like, because I'd seen it on TV, but never actually visited it. It was crazy to go in there and see the Colosseum and where they kept fighters and lions and all that stuff. It was pretty unique.
Very nice.
And then all those people on the bottom right hand screen, those were all damage control men before we became flying squad. So if you noticed in the video, there were people wearing blue coveralls and people wearing red coveralls.
Right.
Red coveralls are something you earn. They're not given to you. You have to basically be the top firefighter, and it's a process you go through of learning every piece of equipment. And then on our ship, what we did was we took our picture, right before we got ready to leave on deployment. And the guy in the center in civilian clothes, he was actually the guy who instructed us, those two, on how to get our red coveralls.
Okay. I always kind of wondered that. I didn't know if it just was, if you were damage control, that was just part of the uniform, so that you would know that person had that rate or that function, other than it's a qualification. That's interesting.
So you got to become a part of flying squad, which means you're the absolute best the ship has
Right.
for fighting. There's nobody they would rather go fight a fire than your team.
Okay.
And it's not only damage controlmen. You'll have electricians on there, eye seamen. So the rates vary. Hull technicians, MMs, ENs. It's whoever's the best. So as a damage controlman, if you're not the best and you don't have red coveralls, it's kind of embarrassing. So you got to earn those.
Okay, gotcha. Understood.
All right, we'll go to this one. You guys feel free to ask any questions. This is actually the Bonham Richard. And as you can see, the firefighters are coming on board the ship. They were in what we call a dry dock period. So they actually didn't have any firefighting equipment readily available. And that's probably one of the reasons why that fire is that bad.
Yeah, and so it's a huge. Once they're getting everything under control, right? But that's probably a huge lesson learned, process change effort, right? Because a ship like that, this shouldn't happen, right?
Absolutely. So everything that has happened, and all these rules that we have as damage controlmen, all these rules that we have in the Navy, as whatever job you have, those rules were written in blood. It's because something happened and they had to change the rule of why we do this, why we do that. So that's why one of the reasons why the training is so important. You never want to question it, because that rule was written on somebody else's back. As you can see, they're walking up because they didn't have firefighting equipment. That's pretty bad. To be
Is that typical?
Negative. That's actually a no-go.
Okay.
All your firefighting equipment should be on board, even in the docks and dry dock periods. If you look to the bottom right, there's a hose running there. I know when we were in dry docks, we had those big yellow hoses that ran all throughout the ship, and you were able to use them. And if you look, like right where they're shooting the fire up,
right,
going up, that kind of looks like hoses going on there, but it could be something different. But it looks like it could be hoses. So I'm just wondering what firefighting capabilities they had there. And to be a firefighter, if you guys have to go off the ship to get dressed to come back on to fight, there should be something there in place to make sure your shipmates are safe. Wow.
So as this is going on, and it's still going on at the time of the recording here, is your rating getting any sort of feedback of what's happening there?
So typically that's going to be a 3 to 6 month process.
Okay.
They'll actually go in, they'll do an investigation. We have what we call DC charts. It's where we chart everything that happens from the time that fire starts. So when they were yelling out like Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, There's somebody actually in another room with a radio that is writing those letters on a board in a certain manner that we know exactly how the fire happened, what time it happened, who went to fight it, how many people went to fight it, how many people were on air, how many people were off air, what agents were used. And they take that and they break it down and they say, what could we have done better? And that's how we get our training essentially.
Right. Yeah. And it's really important so that this would never happen again. Right. And
absolutely.
So cadets, just really take a good look at this picture, right? And look at those 2 rows of sailors walking there. Right. They don't have the option of not going. And I can guarantee you every one of them wants to do this, right? They're pumped, they're ready to go, right? There's nobody reluctant here. So think about if you're looking for real life heroes in this world, that's who you should be looking at, right? Not maybe some other false people that act like they're brave. This is a picture of people doing it right now. So that's why there should be so much respect for, people in the DC rating, but, all sailors, because all sailors are firefighters that would do this. And they're marching into an inferno, right? So
absolutely,
there's something there. One of the cadets was interested in, like, just say for one of those sailors right now, with the gear that they have on, right? About how much weight is that?
So the weight and the restriction in those, you're very limited, but they teach you how to move. That bottle right there is a 45 minute bottle. So you could be toting anywhere, honestly, from 150 pounds to basically 50 pounds. If you're the guy carrying the tamp, which is the rake, it's a big old block, and it's made of steel. That thing's heavy. Right. Plus all your firefighting gear. If you're going to a flooding, you're carrying all these wooden blocks and steel stuff. You got to be able to fight anything that combats you at that time. You got to be able to do anything. You got to be able to adjust. So you bring all your equipment there, so you're not running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. While that time clock's going down, your shipmates are getting more and more in danger.
So, clearly you have to be physically fit to do this, right? So are you guys a bunch of PT monsters to make this happen? Because you can't just sit on the couch and then jump off and do this.
Absolutely. A lot of times when you're on deployment, you have a lot of gym time, and you train to wear those FFEs. Firefighting ensemble is the abbreviation. You train up to those. So you don't just go in the first time and say, hey, I'm going to wear this thing for 45 minutes. You start off at about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then we move you up to about 30 minutes. Then we move you up to 45 minutes. And then some of the drills that I've been on, we've worn them for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. In real evolutions, you're wearing them for 2.5, 3 hours.
Right. So
they get hot.
And so it's not just that, but you're next to a fire.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, some of the reports that are coming out of San Diego are from, some of the sailors and the civilian counterparts, with heat exhaustion and all that other stuff. It should be pretty obvious how that could happen.
Absolutely. We had a fire Thanksgiving Day in 2014. I was actually on the flight deck, and we were getting ready to turn over because we had Thanksgiving Day off, and I had been on watch for 5-6 hours. We were turning over, and I was going to go home and eat Thanksgiving dinner. Well, the bells rung at 8:02, and I was off work at 8 o'clock. Me and the other group that was still there, we ran to the fire, put it out, but we had to stay there for an additional 2 to 3 hours, and it was hot. I'm talking, it was hot. The space gets up, anywhere from 160 to 200 degrees. You're basically, you got time hacks that you guys got to rotate, so everybody can refresh themselves.
Yeah, and it's not that, okay, well, my shift is over, I'm out of here.
Absolutely, never that.
No. So, there's that, the dedication is just not, thought, it's there, and it has to be there all the time.
100%.
Um, so one of the questions that the cadets are interested in, and this is the type of thing that they see in their regular life, is, we've talked about a lot of great stuff and the training that you've done and the jobs and things like that. But as you've been going through your career or training or whatever, not everything goes to plan, right? There are things that you have to accomplish that maybe you failed and it didn't work out, right? And that's true with all of us. So we all are there. But can you give an example of like why you've or ever been in that scenario, and then what did you do to recover from it?
So a lot of times, it's a great training moment. A failure is not necessarily a bad thing, and a failure is not even considered really a failure unless you just quit and give up. Failure is like all in the eye of the beholder, right? I call them speed bumps and hurdles. If you didn't learn anything from your shortcomings, then it's a failure. But if you can take what you learned that you failed in or that you didn't do as well in, and you adjust accordingly, it's going to turn out 10 times better every time. We were on deployment and I shut off a main engine. Big deal in the Navy. Big deal in the Navy. I was a little tired, but I didn't take the time. And that's why I talk about the 6 P's. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance, because I didn't take the time to look up to make sure it was the right engine I was hitting stop on. So I learned definitely from them and my upper chain of command very fast how to adjust accordingly.
Right.
But the Navy does train you very well on building a solid base when you get in the military, especially in the Navy. I can't speak for the other branches, but the Navy definitely they teach you how to build from bedrock and not on that sand.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. One of the other cadets is interested in knowing, what is your one favorite thing in the Navy?
Oof. One?
You have one choice, so you have to make it good.
Camaraderie.
Okay.
It's definitely it beats Taco Tuesday, so it's definitely the camaraderie that that somebody's there for you for the rest of your life. I've got guys that are in San Diego. I got guys that are in Chicago pushing boots. I just talked to my chief about 10 minutes ago. He's shipping over to California. And it's not only, it's more than a high school friend that I had. These guys and these young ladies are people that I would trust to watch my kid with. I trust them to come over to my house. We have Thanksgiving dinner. As a matter of fact, that Thanksgiving that we had that fire, 6 of the guys that were in that fire with us came over and had Thanksgiving dinner. It's real family. So it's hard to explain, and you can't grasp it until you leave your first ship and you're leaving your friends and your family and you're moving on, mm-hmm. and you're still keeping in touch with them 6, 7, 8 years later. They're there for the births of your kids, and they're there for weddings. So it's definitely the camaraderie is the number one thing, to know that somebody is willing to sacrifice everything for you.
And that, I think that wraps it up perfectly, right? Because, and I know this to be true, and I'm sure that MC1 and STG1 can say this as well. The term shipmate and that brother and sisterhood you have with your fellow sailors, it never goes away. It's always there, and they'll be there for you, and vice versa. And it's hard to explain it to people that haven't been directly exposed to it, but it is definitely a family, and it really is a great thing.
Absolutely.
Another question someone has is, how would you, if you're in a position of recommending your rate to someone because they're interested in this, how would you do that? Not necessarily sell them on them, because that's not what we do, but I mean, how would you describe what you do in a term that somebody would go like, yeah, okay, sign me up?
So I love firefighting because I'm an adrenaline junkie. I love that that, hey, we're going to do this. And it's a direct result. You see direct results when you fix something. Fire's happening, fire's out. The fact that you're saving other people. If that fire keeps burning, somebody's gonna get hurt.
Right.
It's the same reason that cops love being cops, that firefighters love being firefighters, and that nurses love being nurses. I love the fact that people depend on me to stay safe, and I can look at my shipmate next to me and be like, hey, you're going to go home and see your wife, your kids, your son, your loved ones tonight because of what we did as a damage controlman unit. And not only that, it goes back to that shipmate, what we do as shipmates to make sure the other one's safe. So damage control, I would say, firefighting, flooding, you're just making sure your shipmate's safe.
Right. And really, what could be better than that?
Yeah, it's a great feeling. It's an amazing feeling of satisfaction. So
I'll leave you with one final question, because again, our cadets are in an interesting time in their lives where they're starting to make future decisions. And cadets, just because you make one decision now and you go down that path, it doesn't mean game's over. Life is full of redirections and doing other things, right? Just like Petty Officer Brown was saying about, you have speed bumps and things that you change in course correct and stuff like that, which is great advice. But one of the cadets is asking, do you have any particular advice for someone preparing themselves to go to boot camp?
Preparing yourself to go to boot camp, just remember predominantly that everybody who's been in the Navy has been in your boat before. When you get there, it's very easy to get down on yourself, especially if if your plan to join the Navy was built on sand. You need to drill down to the bedrock and really ask yourself, why am I here? Why did I take this next step? Because if why you do it is bigger than what you do, you're going to win all day, every day. Me, I get up and put this uniform on for my wife, my son, and this country every day. And I love wearing the cloth of the nation. So why I do it, I don't care if I'm working late some nights. I don't care if I have to fight a fire. I don't care, because my why is bigger than my what. So going to boot camp, make sure you mentally prepare yourself. Everybody loves to ask about the physical portion. It's an 8-week training program where they're going to physically make you tough. You're going to be fine. The mental portion is what you need to go in there with your mindset of, hey, I'm willing to make this next step in my life. And for that Sea Cadet who's out there, man, congratulations, and I can't wait to see you out in the fleet.
So, Petty Officer Brown, I really can't thank you enough for, taking your time to, address our Sea Cadets, be part of this program, and give your insights of, how vitally important the damage controlman rating is and what you're doing with it. You really hit on some really incredible, important things that cadets, I hope you're learning from, and you can apply that in your life. So this has been, not just discussion of damage control, right? But it is, to me, has been a very inspirational talk. So, Pastor Brown, thank you very much.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. If you guys ever want us to come back, just let us know.
Fantastic. And also to your shipmates at NRD New England for participating in this. We like to have everybody from across the country participate, and we appreciate the time. Cadets, just like we do for every presentation that we do, there will be that online quiz. So go through it. It's not meant to be super challenging, but if there's a few things you have to look up on the internet, you know how to use a computer. You're really good at it at this point in time. So go do that. Get the pride in doing that, and show off that you completed this effort. You'll be happy with the satisfaction of following through with the task. So on behalf of everyone involved with this, please, if you like it, give us some thumbs up. We always appreciate the positive reviews with that. Tell your friends, tell your shipmates in the Sea Cadet Corps about our program, and we will see you next time for another episode of Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you around.
Thanks,
Take
sir.
care.